Hi, I'm Dylan Paris. I'm in my new studio. Still in work in progress, so I'm just filming here in this corner. So there's been a ton of videos already about the OP1 Field. I'm not going to make a video about the OP1 Field. I think there's enough good ones. But looking at the OP1 Field, something that really struck me is that there's another device that Teenage Engineering makes that has actually had a lot of issues because of its build quality that I feel like could actually benefit from a Field model or just a hardware revision in general. And that would be the OPZ, or OPZ if you're not in America. OPZ was one of my first groove boxes, one of my first hardware pieces of music making gear. I think it kind of spoiled me in some ways because I didn't realize how powerful it was for how small and relatively cheap it was. As I went on from other devices, I started to realize, you know, the amount of stuff that thing could do in one small package was actually pretty unique, and I do actually kind of miss it. This video idea kind of came up from me realizing I wanted to maybe get an OPZ again. I was watching a bunch of OP1 and then OP1 Field videos and be like, I'm not paying $2,000. I don't have $2,000, and I don't think that device is worth $2,000 to be frank. But because the OPZ starts at around $600 and you can get it cheaper in the used market, I was like, well, maybe I'll get an OPZ again and experiment with that. But when I started to think about that, I started to think about how when I tried to sell my OPZ, which I bought brand new from a local synth shop called Control Voltage here in Portland, I would highly recommend them. Not sponsored, they're just cool. But when I bought that OPZ, when I tried to sell the OPZ, my first buyer noted that it had a double trigger problem, which I never realized was like a problem. I didn't realize double triggering was a thing. And then they sent me a video of it, like, hey, this is what's happening. And I was like, well, that's not okay. You know, I didn't tell you that was part of it because I didn't know it was part of it. And so I gave them their money back, they gave me the OPZ back, and I, for whatever reason, made the decision. Well, first I tried to reach out to Teenage Engineering Support or somebody, and no one could help me, which is, you know, something that Freebeat has talked about as well, that Teenage Engineering Support can be pretty bad. And so when I realized I wasn't going to be able to get help with it, or at least like for free, which it really should have been. I mean, when my Novation circuit had issues, it was like a refurbished circuit. Novation literally just swapped it out for me for like a brand new unit. This was a Gen 1 circuit that was already like 2 years old or something, but it was in warranty because Novation is awesome, and this again is not sponsored. I just respect them as a company, and they handle customer support really well. And so I was really shocked when the OPZ support was so bad, and so I ended up selling it, I think out of like spite. Like I was like, I'm not going to use this anymore, I'm angry. So I sold it, and I had to advertise that it had a double triggering issue because I wasn't going to be dishonest. And so when I did that, I ended up losing quite a bit of money. I think I sold my OPZ for like 350 bucks, which in hindsight, I just should have kept it. I don't know what I was thinking. I was just mad. Anyway, fast forward to now, and you know, they've announced the TX6, which is you know what it is. I guess if you don't, it's a very small mixer, recorder, synthesizer, whatever, tiny. Some people seem into it, so more power to them. And then they announced the OP1 Field, which is part of the Field line that the TX6 is part of. And both of these devices are very expensive. The TX6 is $1,200, the OP1 Field is $2,000, and they are meant, I think, to appeal to a higher end niche market. It's weird to say that Teenage Engineering like only makes stuff for rich people because they make the pocket operator lines, which is the cheapest, easiest entry point to music production gear. This is the pocket operator arcade. I forget which number designation it has because I put this little rubber case on it. This is my first like groove box I ever owned. My friends got it for me for Christmas in like 2018, and it kind of started my love affair with Teenage Engineering and with music production hardware. I think it's unfair to say that Teenage Engineering is cost prohibitive in every segment, but the OP1, which is their flagship music product, is absolutely cost prohibitive and has only become more so over time. I'm not going to retrace the history, but suffice it to say it's a lot more expensive now, especially the Field model, than it was when it came out, and probably more than inflation would have it be. Anyway, thinking about the OPZ, this is a device that starts, I think, at $599. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe it's still $599, and you can get it cheaper on used sites or in your local area, with the big caveat that it may double trigger, that it's going to have hardware issues, and it's not very well supported. And I think it's that cheap because it is plastic. It's plastic all around, and it's not really well done plastic. It's very flexible. It's something I'm worried about breaking when I had it. I used a case with it, which helped, and the buttons are really undependable. And so when I was looking at the OP1 Field, I was realizing, you know, actually an OPZ Field would be a really interesting device. So bear with me. And Teenage Engineering, if you're watching, you know, feel free to steal these ideas and then send me a beta unit or something. But no, seriously, what I would like to see from an OPZ field is one, a price no higher than $900. I mean, ideally it'd be like 8, probably. I think 8 would be reasonable. If you could build an OPZ with an aluminum chassis and dependable buttons, I'm talking like Electron level quality of button presses, that I think alone would justify a $200 to $300 price increase. A metal body, dependable buttons, that would go a long way, I think, towards creating a market for that device because it would be trustworthy. So that is, I mean, that alone would be enough for me personally. A metal OPZ field would be really cool. But let's talk about what else I would like to see. Not to keep shouting out Electron, but they've also really changed the game when it comes to USB interfaces with their groove boxes and devices such as the Digitac, Digatone, and the new Syntac. And I would love to see a version of an audio interface such as Overbridge for the OPZ. This is something I feel like could hypothetically be done via hardware or software update rather for the original OPZ. But if it can't due to memory or CPU or whatever issues, then I would love to see an increase in the actual computing power of the device so that it could handle 8-track output over USB so that you could actually record live audio of each individual stems of your live performances utilizing all the really awesome live effects and MIDI effects that are built into the OPZ. And actually having all those tracks immediately out. It's something I really like about some of my other gear is that you can output the stems, and having the ability to do that from the OPZ I think would be a game changer. So yeah, multi-track 8-channel out of your live performances when you're composing would be really great. Along with that, you know, much the same way that the OP1 field has increased the amount of savable projects via the 8 tapes that you now have in the 4 different styles, I would really like to see more savable patterns and potentially projects with patterns. Something that really blew my mind when I first got a Digatone after having an OPZ was that I wasn't limited just to a set amount of patterns. I also had full-scale, high-level projects and banks of projects. I was kind of so used to the OPZ's very kind of limited amount of projects and patterns that I didn't even realize you could have more. Now that kind of complexity might necessitate a screen, but I honestly felt like using the OPZ without a screen was really doable, and using it with the app was pretty great too. So if you needed the app to browse, you know, different project folders so that you could then load up different areas of patterns, I could live with that. Some people might want to see a screen on the OPZ, but I actually think that would probably push the price really close to the OP1 field territory. I'm guessing implementing the full app functionality onto a built-in screen would probably fully eliminate the price difference. That has to be a huge part of why the OPZ is cheaper than the OP1 or the OP1 field for that matter. And so yeah, I don't think putting a screen on it, especially with the development they've done with the app at this point, makes sense, but there's absolutely an argument for it. You just would likely push it into a territory that would again be out of reach for most people. I think creating an OPZ field that is sub 800 or 900, definitely at least less than 1,000, and has, you know, a trustable, dependable build, honestly with better customer support and, you know, an expanded synth range, sampling capability, more projects, more patterns, that sort of thing. I think that would be a device that might kind of appease the market a little bit, because I think Teenage Engineering is pushed really far into the high-end territory. Also, I've seen a lot of people say that Teenage Engineering is the Apple of synthesizers, and I would just say that like Apple sells the M1 MacBook Air for like $1,000 or something, and that thing smokes the hell out of most computers, or at least it did when it came out. They continue to create relatively cheap computers that can do quite a bit, including like a $300 iPad. Now, you know my feelings on iPad music at this point, but like you can't argue that that isn't the best value in computing, basically. The generic insert year here iPad. So anyway, I would push back a little bit on the argument that Teenage Engineering is the Apple of synthesizers, although then you could probably counter that the pocket operators are the iPad, and I don't know. It's an interesting conversation, but I don't think it's a great analogy as someone who's really deep in the weeds on computers. I think that Teenage Engineering is trying to be like the Mercedes-Benz of synthesizers at this point, or maybe they're Toyota and the POs are Toyota and the OPs are Lexus. I don't know, whatever. I'm lost in the weeds, and I also don't drive, so I shouldn't be using car analogies. Anyway, if you've watched this much of the video, I would love to know what you'd like to see from any future Teenage Engineering devices, or if you think that there's room for a competitor like maybe Novation to come in, make something like a Circuit Pro, combines the rhythm and the tracks abilities into one device or something like that. Korg could maybe step in and make a hardware gadget. Be interesting. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you'd like to see from any of these companies or your dream device below. Consider liking and subscribing. Shout out to my girlfriend and my roommate for getting me this sign for Christmas. It's very nice. And if there's any gear you're interested in, if you want to drop $2,000 on the OP1 field, please use my perfect circuit link below. below. Anything you buy, I get a small commission of at no additional cost to you. So it helps me, helps you. I hope you have a great week. This video is a little late because I had wicked food poisoning on Friday and was pretty down for the count yesterday. So if I'm a little weird in this one, that is why. But I appreciate you a bunch, and I hope life is treating you well. And that if you have $2,000 to spend on an OP1 field, that, you know, you savor that feeling. Congratulations, you made it. Jeffrey Bezos. All right.